You watch impatient people rush ahead and seemingly win while you're left wondering if you're careful. Measured approach is actually holding you back. Every opportunity feels like it's slipping away as you deliberate and plan, while others grab what they want through bold, immediate action, leaving you questioning whether patience is wisdom or weakness. I am Sun Tzu, and I learned that true strategic patience isn't about waiting, it's about preparing so thoroughly that when the moment comes, victory is inevitable. The patience principles I'll share will show you how to turn every waiting period into a strategic advantage, positioning yourself so perfectly that success becomes unavoidable when timing aligns. Whether you're positioning armies for battle or positioning yourself for life's opportunities, the same laws of strategic patience determine who ultimately prevails. Start by liking this video, subscribing for more life-changing insights, and commenting your location below. Let's see how far this wisdom needs to travel to reach those ready to master timing itself. My name is Sun Tzu, and I lived over 25 centuries ago in ancient China during the spring and autumn period, a time when kingdoms rose and fell based on the wisdom of their strategies and the patience of their leaders. I was not born into nobility or handed power on a golden plate. I earned my position through careful observation, meticulous planning, and above all, through understanding that the greatest victories come to those who master the art of strategic patience. The bamboo scroll that contained my first principles still bears the ink stains of late nights spent documenting what I observed on countless battlefields. I watched ambitious generals charge into battle without proper preparation, driven by the intoxicating rush of immediate action. I saw them fall, one after another, victims of their own impatience. But I also witnessed something far more powerful: quiet commanders who waited, who prepared, who positioned themselves so perfectly that when they finally moved, their victory was already assured. Strategic patience is not the passive waiting that modern people mistake for wisdom. When someone tells you to be patient today, they usually mean sit still and hope for the best. This is not what I practiced, and it is not what I am teaching you. True strategic patience is active, intelligent, and purposeful. It is the difference between a farmer who plants seeds and hopes for rain, and a farmer who studies weather patterns, prepares the soil, times the planting perfectly, and creates conditions where a bountiful harvest becomes inevitable. I learned this distinction through years of studying human nature under the pressure of life and death decisions. When survival depends on your choices, you quickly separate effective strategies from comfortable illusions. I discovered that impatience and false patience are both forms of weakness. And patience, because it forces you to act before conditions are favorable, and false patience, because it prevents you from acting when conditions are perfect. The greatest lesson from my early campaigns was understanding that strategic patience requires more strength than impulsive action. Anyone can charge forward when emotions run high. It takes tremendous discipline to hold your position when every instinct screams for immediate movement. But this discipline becomes your greatest weapon, because while others exhaust themselves in premature battles, you conserve your energy for the moment when victory is certain. This is why strategic patience became the cornerstone of everything I wrote in The Art of War. Every principle, every tactic, every strategy depends on your ability to wait for the right moment while actively preparing for that moment. Without this foundation, all other military wisdom becomes useless theory. I have watched kingdoms crumble because their leaders could not distinguish between urgency and importance, between the pressure to act and the wisdom to wait. I have also seen small, patient forces defeat massive armies because they understood that timing, not size, determines victory. The difference between success and failure often comes down to this single principle: the mastery of strategic patience. The broken hourglass sits as a monument to one of humanity's greatest deceptions: the belief that patience means passive, waiting for circumstances to change in your favor. I observe modern society with the same analytical eye I once used to. Study enemy formations, and I see millions of people trapped in this fundamental misunderstanding of what patience truly means. When I hear people say good things come to those who wait, I recognize immediately why so many lives end in disappointment. This advice contains a dangerous half-truth that leads people to surrender their power to time and chance. Yes, good things require time to develop, but they do not automatically come to those who simply wait. They come to those who use waiting periods strategically, who prepare during the quiet moments, who position themselves to recognize and seize opportunities when they appear. I have witnessed this confusion destroy more potential than any enemy army ever could. People sit in jobs they hate, waiting for recognition that never comes. Because they believe patience means accepting current circumstances without action, they remain in relationships that drain their spirit, convinced that patience requires enduring rather than improving. They postpone their dreams indefinitely, mistaking procrastination for patience, and wondering why they're careful. Measured approach yields no results. The truth I learned through decades of warfare is that both impatience and false patience lead to defeat, but through different paths. The impatient person charges into battle without preparation and gets crushed by superior forces. The falsely patient person never enters the battle at all and slowly withers away in the comfort of inaction. Both approaches guarantee failure, but the second feels more socially acceptable because it appears wise and measured. Real strategic patience requires a complete mental framework shift. Instead of waiting for conditions to improve, you actively work to improve conditions. Instead of hoping for the right opportunity, you create the right opportunity. Instead of accepting your current position as permanent, you use your current position as a foundation for reaching a better one. This shift demands that you become comfortable with what I call productive discomfort, the tension of knowing you could act now but choosing to wait because better timing will yield superior results. Most people cannot tolerate this tension, so they either act impulsively to relieve it, or convince themselves that waiting without purpose is noble patience. I learned to embrace this tension during long military campaigns where premature action would cost lives and resources, but delayed action would also cost lives and resources. The skill lies in maintaining perfect readiness while waiting for optimal conditions, staying prepared to move instantly when the moment arrives. The broken hourglass represents everyone who has waited without purpose, hoping that time alone would solve their problems. But time is not a strategy. Time is simply the medium in which strategy operates. Your patience becomes strategic only when you fill your waiting periods with intelligent preparation, careful observation, and systematic positioning for future advantage. This understanding separates those who master their circumstances from those who become victims of their circumstances. The difference is not in how long you wait, but in what you accomplish while you wait. The hidden arsenal that secured my greatest victories was never visible to enemy scouts who surveyed our camps before battle. While they counted our soldiers and estimated our supplies, they could not measure the months of preparation that had already determined the outcome. This taught me the supreme power of invisible preparation, the work you do that competitors cannot see, evaluate, or counter. I learned this principle during my first major campaign when I was still young and eager to prove myself. The enemy had superior numbers and better equipment, advantages that should have guaranteed their victory. But while they spent their time displaying their strength and intimidating neighboring territories, I spent mine studying their weaknesses, training my soldiers in specialized tactics, and building secret supply lines that would sustain us through a prolonged conflict. When battle finally came, their visible advantages meant nothing. Our hidden preparation had created capabilities they never expected and could not match. They had prepared for the army they could see, but we had become an army they could not have imagined. This victory taught me that the most powerful preparation happens in shadows, away from the attention and interference of those who would oppose you. Invisible preparation works, because human nature leads people to prepare only for what they can observe and understand. Your competitors study your current capabilities and plan accordingly, but they cannot prepare for capabilities you have not yet revealed. While they react to your present position, you are building the foundation for your future position. This principle applies to every aspect of life. The person who masters skills privately while others socialize gains advantages that become apparent only when opportunity requires those skills. The professional who studies industry trends during quiet periods recognizes shifts that others miss. The entrepreneur who builds relationships before needing them finds doors open that remain closed to others. I developed my most effective strategies during long periods when no active conflict demanded my attention. Other generals used peaceful times for celebration and relaxation, but I used them to analyze past battles, study enemy patterns, and develop new tactical approaches. When war resumed, I possessed strategic innovations that no opponent had encountered or prepared to counter. The art lies in identifying which preparations will provide future advantage without telegraphing your intentions. You must strengthen yourself in ways that appear unrelated to your ultimate objectives. The general who obviously prepares for siege warfare signals his intentions to the enemy, but the general who secretly develops rapid deployment capabilities creates options that remain hidden until deployment becomes necessary. Your waiting periods become your greatest competitive advantage when you use them for invisible preparation. While others rest or worry about current circumstances, you build the capabilities that will dominate future circumstances. The key is focusing on preparation that compounds over time, rather than preparation that provides only immediate benefits. I kept detailed records of every preparation method that proved effective, creating what I called the hidden arsenal, not weapons and supplies, but capabilities and knowledge that could be deployed when needed. These preparations were invisible to observers, but decisive in outcomes. Remember that your most important work happens when no one is watching, when no immediate reward motivates your effort, when the benefits seem distant and uncertain. This is when character reveals itself and future success takes shape. The preparation you do in private determines the victories you achieve in public. The oracle's map that guided my most successful campaigns was not drawn by mystics or fortune-tellers, but by careful observation of patterns that reveal when conditions are ripening for action. I learned to read the battlefield of time itself, understanding that success comes not from forcing action, but from recognizing when the universe aligns in your favor. During one of my most challenging campaigns, I faced an enemy who held every apparent advantage: better position, more resources, stronger fortifications. My advisors urged immediate attack, arguing that delay would only strengthen our opponent's position. But I had learned to read signs that others missed. Environmental signals that indicated optimal timing had not yet arrived. I observed the seasonal patterns affecting supply lines, the political tensions within enemy ranks, the fatigue cycles of their forces, and the subtle shifts in local support. These factors created a complex timing matrix that would determine success or failure regardless of our tactical brilliance. Forcing action before these elements aligned would guarantee defeat, but waiting for perfect alignment would ensure victory with minimal cost. The breakthrough came when I realized that most people cannot read these timing signals because they focus only on obvious, immediate factors. They see what is happening now and assume it will continue unchanged. But I learned to perceive the underlying currents that create change. the forces that transform today's disadvantage into tomorrow's opportunity. 3 seasons I waited while my enemy grew confident in their superior position. My own forces questioned my strategy, wondering why we remained idle while opportunities seemed to pass us by. But I was not idle. I was reading the signs that indicated when conditions would shift decisively in our favor. The first sign was resource depletion. My enemy's apparent strength was consuming their reserves faster than they could replenish them. The second sign was internal discord. Their success had created competing factions that would eventually undermine their unity. The third sign was environmental change. Weather patterns were shifting in ways that would neutralize their positional advantages. When all 3 factors converged, I moved swiftly and decisively. What appeared to observers as sudden action was actually the culmination of months of patient observation and preparation. The victory came so easily that historians later called it luck, but I knew it was the result of reading timing correctly. This experience taught me that the universe provides clear signals about optimal timing, but only to those who develop the skill to perceive them. Most people miss these signals because they are focused on forcing outcomes through effort and willpower, rather than aligning their actions with natural timing. Reading the battlefield of time requires developing sensitivity to patterns that operate on longer cycles than immediate events. You must observe how different forces interact and influence each other over weeks, months, and seasons rather than hours and days. This perspective reveals opportunities that remain invisible to those focused only on present circumstances. The skill becomes recognizing when conditions are moving toward alignment versus when they are moving away from alignment. During periods of movement toward alignment, strategic patience serves you well. During periods of movement away from alignment, immediate action may be necessary to prevent unfavorable shifts from becoming permanent. The predestined seal that I carried into my greatest battles was used only when victory had become inevitable, not through hope or optimism, but through systematic creation of conditions where defeat became impossible. This seal represented my core philosophy that true strategy makes success a foregone conclusion rather than a hopeful possibility. Most people approach their goals with uncertainty, hoping their efforts will lead to success, but never knowing if their approach will work. They work hard and hope for the best, but they cannot guarantee outcomes because they have not learned to engineer conditions that make success inevitable. This approach keeps them trapped in a cycle of effort and disappointment, never understanding why their dedication does not translate into reliable results. I discovered the doctrine of inevitable victory during a campaign where traditional military thinking suggested certain defeat. We faced overwhelming odds, but I refused to accept that circumstances beyond our control would determine our fate. Instead, I systematically analyzed every factor that could influence the outcome and began methodically altering those factors in our favor. The transformation began with changing our definition of victory. Instead of trying to overpower our enemy through direct confrontation, I redefined victory as achieving our strategic objectives with minimal loss. This shift allowed me to see options that remained invisible when victory meant only total defeat of enemy forces. Next, I identified the minimum conditions necessary for our redefined victory to become inevitable. These conditions involved specific positioning, timing, resource allocation, and enemy responses. Rather than hoping these conditions would occur naturally, I began deliberately creating them through strategic patience and systematic preparation. The process required months of careful maneuvering, but each move brought us closer to a position where our success could not be prevented. I was not gambling on favorable circumstances, was manufacturing favorable circumstances through patient, intelligent action. When the decisive moment arrived, victory felt effortless because all necessary conditions had been established in advance. We achieved our objectives so smoothly that observers attributed our success to luck or superior resources, never recognizing the months of strategic positioning that had made the outcome inevitable. This experience taught me that inevitable victory requires a fundamental shift in how you approach any challenge. Instead of hoping your current capabilities will prove sufficient, you systematically develop the capabilities that make success unavoidable. Instead of depending on favorable circumstances, you create the circumstances that favor your objectives. The doctrine applies to every area of life. The professional who makes career advancement inevitable by systematically building relationships, skills, and reputation rather than hoping their current performance will be recognized. The entrepreneur who makes business success inevitable by creating conditions where failure becomes impossible rather than launching ventures that depend on luck. Inevitable victory eliminates the anxiety and uncertainty that paralyze most people's efforts. When you know your approach will work because you have engineered the conditions for success, you can act with confidence and persistence that others cannot match. You are no longer hoping for the best, you are systematically creating the best. The predestined seal reminds me that strategic patience serves this ultimate purpose, creating conditions where your desired outcome becomes the only logical result. This transforms every waiting period from passive hope into active construction of inevitable success. Remember that inevitable victory does not mean easy victory. It means that your success becomes certain regardless of obstacles or opposition, because you have systematically addressed every factor that could prevent achievement of your objectives. The restless general's sword that hangs in my memory belonged to one of the most capable military minds I ever encountered, a leader whose impatience ultimately destroyed everything he had built through years of brilliant tactical innovation. His story taught me that impatience is not just a personal weakness, it is a strategic vulnerability that can be exploited by those who understand its patterns. General Wei possessed every quality that should have guaranteed lasting success. His tactical brilliance was undisputed, his soldiers respected him deeply, and his early victories had established his reputation throughout the kingdom. But beneath his competence lay a restlessness that would prove fatal, a psychological need for constant action that prevented him from recognizing when patience would serve him better than movement. I observed his campaigns carefully, noting how his impatience followed predictable patterns. When faced with obstacles, he immediately sought ways to overcome them through force or clever maneuvering. When opportunities appeared, he seized them instantly without sufficient analysis of long-term consequences. When enemies retreated, he pursued relentlessly rather than consolidating his gains. These responses seemed admirable and generated impressive short-term results, but they contained the seeds of eventual destruction. His constant action exhausted his resources faster than victory could replenish them. His immediate responses to opportunities prevented him from recognizing better opportunities that required patience to develop. His relentless pursuit of retreating enemies led him into carefully prepared traps. The psychological drivers behind his impatience became clear through our conversations during diplomatic meetings. He equated activity with progress and stillness with stagnation. He believed that urgent action demonstrated leadership, while careful deliberation showed weakness. He was convinced that opportunities disappeared quickly and must be grasped immediately, or lost forever. These beliefs created a mental prison that made strategic patience impossible. He could not tolerate the productive discomfort of waiting when action seemed possible. He could not resist cultural pressure that glorified quick, decisive action over thoughtful preparation. He could not distinguish between real urgency and manufactured urgency created by his own impatience. His downfall came during a campaign where patience would have guaranteed victory. Enemy forces had retreated to a position that appeared vulnerable but was actually designed to exploit his impatience. A patient general would have recognized the trap and waited for the enemy to abandon their disadvantageous position, but Wei could not resist the apparent opportunity for immediate victory. He charged into the trap with characteristic boldness, believing that speed and aggression would overcome any defensive advantages. The battle that followed destroyed his army and ended his career, not because he lacked capability, but because his impatience had finally encountered an opponent who understood how to use patience strategically. This tragedy taught me that impatience creates predictable patterns that patient opponents can exploit. The impatient person becomes reactive rather than strategic, responding to circumstances rather than creating them. They exhaust themselves fighting battles that patience could avoid entirely. I learned to view impatience in others as a strategic advantage for myself. While they rushed toward apparent opportunities, I positioned myself for better opportunities that required patience to recognize. While they exhausted their resources in premature action, I conserved mine for optimal timing. Their impatience became my weapon. The cyclical war banner that flew above my command tent changed colors with each season to remind my officers that strategic patience follows natural cycles, each phase requiring different approaches and different mindsets. Understanding these 5 seasons of strategic patience prevents the fatal error of applying the wrong strategy at the wrong time. Season 1 is the season of observation and intelligence gathering. During this phase, you study the landscape of your situation with the patience of a hunter tracking prey through unfamiliar territory. Your primary objective is comprehending the forces at play, identifying key players and their motivations, recognizing patterns that reveal how change occurs in your particular environment. I spent entire months in this season, during complex campaigns, resisting pressure from advisors who wanted immediate action. The information gathered during patient observation always proved more valuable than any resources that could have been gained through premature action. You must resist the temptation to act on incomplete intelligence, no matter how compelling the apparent opportunities may seem. Season 2 is the season of preparation and resource accumulation. Here, you build the capabilities and gather the resources that will be required when action becomes appropriate. This season demands the discipline to invest in future advantage rather than pursuing immediate gratification. Most people skip this season entirely, preferring to act with whatever capabilities they currently possess. During one crucial campaign, I spent an entire winter in this season while enemy forces celebrated what they believed was my inactivity. They could not see that I was systematically strengthening every aspect of our position, training soldiers in new tactics, establishing supply lines, building alliances, developing innovative equipment. When spring arrived, we possessed capabilities that made our eventual victory inevitable. Season 3 is the season of positioning and relationship building. This phase involves moving yourself into optimal position for when action becomes appropriate, while building the relationships and alliances that will support your objectives. The positioning must appear natural and non-threatening to avoid alerting opponents to your intentions. This season requires the most sophisticated understanding of strategic patience, because you must take action that appears unrelated to your ultimate objectives. The positioning happens gradually through small moves that accumulate into overwhelming advantage. Each move seems insignificant in isolation, but together they create an unassailable strategic position. Season 4 is the season of action. When all conditions align and timing becomes optimal, strategic patience transforms into decisive action. This season requires the ability to move from complete stillness to maximum effort without hesitation or doubt. All the waiting, all the preparation, all the positioning culminates in this moment of execution. The transition from Season 3 to Season 4 demands perfect timing. Move too early and you waste the advantages built through patient preparation. move to late and optimal conditions may shift in favor of your opponents. Reading this transition correctly separates masters of strategic patience from those who understand the theory but cannot execute effectively. Season 5 is the season of consolidation and preparing for the next cycle. After achieving your objective, you must consolidate your gains and begin preparing for the next strategic cycle. This season prevents the common mistake of celebrating victory without securing it, or achieving one objective without positioning for the next dot. Most people celebrate success and then wonder why their achievements prove temporary. They fail to understand that every victory creates new challenges and new opportunities that require their own strategic approach. The cyclical war banner reminded me that strategic patience never ends, it evolves into new cycles with new objectives and new requirements. Understanding these 5 seasons prevents the frustration that destroys most people's patience. When you know which season you are in, you can apply the appropriate strategy without wondering if you should be doing something different. The Scholar Warriors library that I built during long campaigns contained knowledge that proved more valuable than any weapon in my arsenal. This collection represented my understanding that waiting periods become your greatest competitive advantage when you transform them into intensive development opportunities rather than passive endurance tests. During one particularly extended siege, my forces faced months of apparent inactivity while we waited for enemy supplies to dwindle and their resolve to weaken. Other generals would have viewed this period as necessary but unproductive downtime, but I recognized it as an unprecedented opportunity to strengthen every aspect of our capabilities while our opponents grew progressively weaker. I established what I called productive waiting protocols, systematic approaches to using waiting periods for maximum advantage. While we maintained the siege, I had my officers study the tactical innovations of other successful generals, analyzing what made their strategies effective and how we could adapt their insights to our own situation. We practiced new formations, tested experimental equipment, and developed communication systems that would give us decisive advantages in future conflicts. The transformation was remarkable. My soldiers, who initially chafed at the apparent inactivity, began to understand that we were becoming more formidable with each passing week. They could see their own skills improving, their understanding deepening, their confidence growing. What had seemed like forced waiting became eager preparation for inevitable victory. This experience taught me that productive waiting requires shifting your focus from what you cannot do to what you can do. During waiting periods, you cannot control external timing, but you can control your own development. You cannot force opportunities to appear, but you can ensure that you will be ready when opportunities do appear. The key is identifying which capabilities will provide maximum advantage when action becomes possible. During waiting periods, focus on developing skills, knowledge, relationships, and resources that will multiply your effectiveness when timing aligns. This approach transforms every delay into an investment in future success. I developed specific practices for different types of waiting periods. During short waits, I focused on immediate skill, improvement, and tactical refinement. During medium waits, I concentrated on strategic analysis and relationship building. During long waits, I pursued comprehensive capability, development, and innovative thinking that could create entirely new approaches to persistent challenges. Your competition weakens during waiting periods because they view them as obstacles to endure rather than opportunities to exploit. They maintain their current capability level while complaining about circumstances beyond their control. Meanwhile, you systematically strengthen every aspect of your position, emerging from the waiting period far more formidable than when you entered it. The Scholar Warriors library reminds me that knowledge gained during quiet periods often proves more valuable than resources gained during active periods. The insights you develop when external pressure is minimal become the foundation for handling external pressure effectively when it intensifies. Productive waiting also builds the psychological strength required for strategic patience. When you can see tangible progress during waiting periods, you develop confidence in the process rather than anxiety about the delay. You begin to welcome waiting periods as opportunities for advancement rather than dreading them as obstacles to progress. Remember that your most important growth happens during periods when external validation is minimal and immediate rewards are absent. This is when your commitment to excellence reveals itself and your future competitive advantages take shape. The discipline you develop during productive waiting becomes the foundation for all future success. The perfect ambush site that secured one of my most decisive victories was not discovered through luck or chance, but through months of patient analysis and strategic positioning that made the enemy's defeat inevitable before they even arrived. This location became my greatest teacher about how strategic patience allows superior positioning. While early action forces you to accept whatever position happens to be available, the site appeared unremarkable to casual observation, narrow, valley with gentle slopes, and adequate water supply. But I had studied the terrain during different seasons, analyzed how weather patterns affected visibility and movement, and understood how the landscape would channel enemy forces into predictable patterns. Most importantly, I had positioned my forces there gradually, making our presence seem natural and non-threatening. The genius of the position was not its obvious defensive advantages, but its psychological effect on enemy decision-making. The valley appeared to offer them exactly what they wanted, a clear path to their objective, with no apparent obstacles. Their eagerness to reach their destination prevented them from recognizing that the easy path had been deliberately created for them. This experience taught me that superior positioning comes from understanding what your opponents want and creating conditions that make those desires work in your favor. Early action forces you to react to whatever positions are available, but strategic patience allows you to shape the available positions to match your strategic advantages. The principle applies beyond military campaigns to every competitive situation. The professional who waits for the right opportunity can choose positions that highlight their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. The entrepreneur who develops their business concept patiently can enter markets when conditions favor their approach rather than forcing entry. When conditions are hostile, positioning for advantage requires understanding the psychology of your competitors as much as the mechanics of your situation. Impatient competitors reveal their preferences through early action, showing you exactly what they value and how they make decisions. This intelligence allows you to create positions that exploit their biases and blind spots. I learned to view every competitive situation as a positioning game where patience provides overwhelming advantages, while others commit to positions based on immediate circumstances. You can observe their commitments and position yourself to exploit their limitations. While they reveal their capabilities and intentions through early action, you can develop capabilities they cannot anticipate and intentions they cannot prepare for. The art lies in making your superior positioning appear natural rather than calculated. If competitors recognize that you have deliberately maneuvered them into disadvantageous positions, they may change their approach or seek different terrain entirely. But if your positioning seems to result from circumstances rather than strategy, they will proceed confidently into conditions that favor your objectives. Strategic patience allows you to choose your battles in the deepest sense, not just when to fight, but where to fight, under what conditions, and with what advantages. Early action forces you to accept whatever battle conditions exist, but patient positioning allows you to create battle conditions that make your victory probable. The perfect ambush site reminds me that the most devastating attacks come from positions that enemies helped you achieve through their own impatience. When opponents rush toward apparent opportunities that you have carefully prepared for them, their eagerness becomes the weapon you use to defeat them. Remember that superior positioning is not about finding better terrain, but about understanding how to use any terrain to maximize your advantages while minimizing your opponent's advantages. This understanding comes only through patient observation and strategic thinking that extends beyond immediate tactical considerations. Asterisk. The enemy's diary that fell into my hands during a midnight raid revealed psychological patterns that transformed my understanding of strategic patience from personal discipline into competitive weapon. The captured writings showed me that impatient people become predictable in ways that patient strategists can exploit systematically. The diary belonged to a capable general whose tactical skills nearly matched my own, but whose psychological makeup made him vulnerable to strategies that used his impatience against him. His entries revealed the mental patterns that drive impatient behavior: fear of missed opportunities, need for constant validation through action, belief that stillness equals weakness, and inability to tolerate uncertainty. Reading his private thoughts taught me that impatient opponents broadcast their intentions through their reactions to waiting periods. When forced to wait, they become restless and seek ways to create action artificially. When presented with apparent opportunities, they move quickly without sufficient analysis. When their initial plans encounter obstacles, they modify their approach hastily, rather than reconsidering their fundamental strategy. These patterns create exploitable vulnerabilities for those who understand them. I learned to create situations that would trigger predictable responses from impatient opponents, then position myself to benefit from those responses. The key was understanding that their impatience was not random weakness, but systematic psychological limitation that operated according to discoverable rules. During our subsequent encounters, I began testing the psychological insights gained from the diary. I would present apparent opportunities that required patient analysis to evaluate properly, knowing that his impatience would lead him to act before understanding the true nature of what I was offering. I would create artificial urgency around decisions that actually benefited from extended consideration, knowing that time pressure would compromise his judgment. The results exceeded my expectations. His predictable responses to these psychological triggers allowed me to anticipate his strategies and prepare countermeasures before he could implement them. His impatience became my early warning system, showing me his intentions before he had fully committed to them. This experience taught me that strategic patience provides enormous advantages in reading and predicting opponent behavior. Patient observation reveals patterns that remain invisible to those focused on immediate action. The ability to wait and watch allows you to understand how opponents think and what drives their decisions. Impatient people also become reactive rather than strategic, responding to your moves instead of creating their own agenda. This gives you the initiative in every encounter, allowing you to set the terms of engagement and force them to play according to your rules rather than their own. I developed specific techniques for exploiting opponent impatience. I would create multiple apparent opportunities simultaneously, knowing that impatient competitors would feel compelled to pursue all of them rather than choosing the best one. I would introduce artificial time constraints that would pressure them into premature decisions. I would make my own patience appear as weakness or indecision, encouraging them to underestimate my preparation and commitment. The enemy's diary reminded me that understanding psychology provides greater advantages than understanding tactics, because psychological patterns drive tactical choices. When you can predict how opponents will respond to different situations, you can create situations that lead them to respond in ways that serve your objectives rather than their own. Your patience becomes their disadvantage when you learn to use their impatience strategically. The signal fire of action that blazed from the highest peak in our territory was lit only once during my entire military career. marking the moment when strategic patience must transform into decisive action without hesitation or doubt. Understanding when to transition from patience to execution separates masters of strategic timing from those who wait too long and miss their moment entirely. The fire burned on a night when every condition we had patiently created finally converged into perfect alignment. Our enemy was weakened by internal discord. Their supplies were depleted from maintaining an unsustainable position. Weather conditions favored our approach, and our own forces had reached peak readiness through months of careful preparation. Waiting longer would have allowed some of these favorable conditions to deteriorate, while acting earlier would have meant fighting without maximum advantage. This moment taught me that recognizing optimal timing requires the same disciplined observation that strategic patience demands. The signs that indicate readiness for action are subtle and can be missed by those who are either too eager to move or too comfortable with waiting. You must develop sensitivity to the shift from not yet to now without allowing that shift to pass unrecognized. The clearest signal is when your preparation phase reaches completion, and additional waiting would not significantly improve your position. This requires honest assessment of your readiness rather than perfectionist delay that uses preparation as an excuse for avoiding action. True strategic patience knows when enough preparation is enough. Environmental signals provide another critical indicator. When external conditions align in ways that create temporary advantage, you must be ready to move before those conditions change. These windows of opportunity often appear briefly and may not recur for extended periods. The most dangerous moment in strategic patience comes when optimal timing arrives, but you have become too comfortable with waiting. Extended patience can create psychological momentum toward inaction that becomes difficult to reverse. The discipline required to act decisively after long periods of patience often exceeds the discipline required to wait patiently in the first place. I had seen other generals miss their moments because they could not shift from the patient mindset to the action mindset quickly enough. They had developed such strong habits of waiting and analyzing that they could not recognize when analysis should end and execution should begin. Their patience, which had been their strength, became their weakness when timing demanded action. The signal fire represented my commitment to act instantly when optimal conditions arrived. Regardless of how comfortable waiting had become, this commitment required preparing not just for the patient phase of strategy, but for the execution phase that would follow it. When the moment comes, hesitation is as dangerous as premature action. All the advantages created through strategic patience can be lost if you cannot transition smoothly from preparation to execution. The switch from patience to action must be decisive and complete. These moments are the payoff for all your waiting, all your preparation, all your disciplined observation. When your moment arrives, you must be ready to move with the same commitment you showed to waiting. The accumulated advantage scroll that documented my strategic gains over decades revealed a mathematical truth that transforms how patient people view their progress. Strategic patience creates exponential rather than linear returns, but only for those who understand how small advantages compound into insurmountable leads over time. Early in my career, I became frustrated watching impatient generals achieve quick victories while my patient approach yielded seemingly modest results. Their immediate successes appeared more impressive than my gradual accumulation of strategic advantages. But the scroll that recorded long-term outcomes told a different story entirely. The impatient generals won individual battles through bold action and superior tactics, but they exhausted their resources faster than victory could replenish them. Each success required maximum effort and left them weakened for subsequent challenges. Their linear approach meant that each victory stood alone, providing no foundation for easier future victories. My patient approach worked differently. Each small advantage I gained through strategic patience became the foundation for gaining larger advantages more easily. The relationships I built during quiet periods provided intelligence and support during active periods. The capabilities I developed while others celebrated provided options that others lacked when new challenges arose. The mathematical principle became clear through careful analysis. Impatient strategies produce results that follow linear progression. Each unit of effort yields roughly the same unit of result. Patient strategies produce results that follow exponential progression. Early efforts yield modest results, but those results multiply each other over time to create dramatic outcomes. This compound effect explains why patient people often appear to achieve success suddenly after long periods of apparent inactivity. Observers see only the final dramatic result, missing the months or years of patient accumulation that made that result inevitable. They attribute the success to luck or hidden advantages, rather than recognizing the mathematical power of compound patience. I learned to view every patient decision as an investment that would pay dividends in all future situations. The discipline I developed through extended waiting made shorter waits easier to endure. The analytical skills I sharpened through careful observation improved my ability to read all future situations. The relationships I cultivated during peaceful periods provided advantages during conflicts. The scroll showed me that compound patience works because each advantage gained through patient strategy makes gaining additional advantages easier and faster. Your first patient victory might require months of preparation, but your 10th patient victory might require only weeks because you have accumulated systems, relationships, knowledge, and reputation that accelerate your progress. This understanding changes how you evaluate short-term sacrifices required for long-term gains. When you recognize that current patience is not just delaying gratification, but multiplying future gratification, the calculation becomes obviously favorable. You are not just choosing between immediate and delayed rewards, you are choosing between modest rewards now and exponentially larger rewards later. The compound interest of patience also explains why patient people ultimately achieve more than impatient people, despite appearing less active. Their accumulated advantages create capabilities that cannot be matched through effort alone. They develop what appears to be effortless mastery because their patient accumulation of small advantages has created overwhelming competitive position. Remember that compound patience requires consistency over time rather than perfection in individual decisions. Small patient choices that seem insignificant individually create dramatic cumulative impact when sustained over months and years. Your patience today becomes the foundation for easier success tomorrow. The Phoenix battle standard that survived my greatest defeat and most humiliating retreat became my most treasured possession, not for the victories it represented, but for the lessons it taught about maintaining strategic patience through apparent failures and devastating setbacks. The defeat came during what should have been my most triumphant campaign. I had prepared meticulously, timed my moves perfectly, and positioned my forces ideally according to every principle of strategic patience I had developed. Yet circumstances beyond my knowledge or control created conditions that made victory impossible despite optimal strategy and execution. The immediate aftermath tested every aspect of my understanding about patience and persistence. My officers questioned whether our patient approach was fundamentally flawed. My soldiers wondered if quick, decisive action might have avoided the disaster. I faced the terrible possibility that years of strategic development had been wasted through factors I could not have anticipated or prevented. The Phoenix Standard reminded me that setbacks often indicate you are on the correct path rather than the wrong path. The very fact that you encounter resistance suggests you are moving toward something valuable enough to be defended. Significant obstacles appear when you approach significant objectives, not when you pursue trivial goals. This perspective transformed how I interpreted delays and apparent failures. Instead of viewing them as evidence that my strategy was incorrect, I began analyzing them as intelligence about the true nature of what I was attempting to achieve. Setbacks revealed hidden complexities that my initial analysis had missed and forced me to develop capabilities I had not known I would need. The key insight was distinguishing between strategic adjustment and abandoning strategic patience. Setbacks often require modifying your approach, changing your timeline, or developing additional capabilities, but they rarely require abandoning the fundamental principle of patient positioning for optimal timing. During my darkest period after the defeat, I maintained the strategic patience framework while completely reconsidering my specific objectives and methods. This process led to innovations that made my subsequent campaigns far more effective than they would have been without the forced learning that setbacks provided. I learned to use delays and obstacles as intelligence-gathering opportunities about timing rather than evidence that timing would never be favorable. When external circumstances prevented action, I studied those circumstances to understand what they revealed about optimal conditions and how to recognize them more accurately. In the future, the Phoenix Standard also taught me that false starts are often necessary preparation for true starts. What appears to be wasted effort in failed attempts actually builds capabilities and understanding that make eventual success possible. The general who never experiences setbacks has never attempted anything difficult enough to require true strategic patience. My greatest comeback came not despite the previous defeat, but because of it. The setback had forced me to develop deeper understanding, stronger capabilities, and more sophisticated strategy than I would have possessed without that painful education. The defeat became the foundation for victories that exceeded my original objectives. Remember that strategic patience does not guarantee a smooth path to your objectives. It guarantees that you will have the resilience and perspective needed to navigate whatever path reality requires. Setbacks test your commitment to the patient approach when immediate results would provide more emotional satisfaction than long-term optimization. The Treaty of Natural Forces that I signed, not with ink but with understanding, represented my most profound strategic insight. Time itself becomes your ally when you work with its natural rhythms instead of fighting against them. This alliance transforms every delay from an obstacle into an advantage and every waiting period from a burden into a weapon. The treaty was forged during a campaign where traditional military wisdom suggested that time favored my enemy. They held superior position, commanded greater resources, and possessed stronger fortifications. My advisors argued that each passing day strengthened their advantage while weakening ours. But I had learned to read time differently, understanding that surface appearances often mask deeper currents that flow in opposite directions. While my enemy appeared to grow stronger with each passing day, I recognized that their apparent strength was actually unsustainable. Their superior position required constant resource expenditure to maintain. Their greater forces created internal tensions as different factions competed for influence. Their stronger fortifications made them less mobile and less able to adapt to changing circumstances. Time was working in my favor, but only if I had the patience to allow it to work completely. The alliance required trusting that natural forces would eventually create conditions more favorable than any I could force through immediate action. This trust demanded a level of strategic faith that most generals could not sustain. That the key insight was recognizing that impatient people fight time while patient people flow with time. When you try to force outcomes according to your personal timeline, you create resistance that wastes energy and resources. When you align your efforts with natural timing, that same energy creates multiplied results with less effort. I learned to make deadlines work for me rather than against me by understanding the difference between artificial urgency and natural urgency. Artificial urgency is created by impatience and social pressure. It forces action when conditions are not optimal. Natural urgency arises when conditions align to create genuine windows of opportunity that close if not utilized. The alliance of time taught me that patient people ultimately control timing, because they can wait for optimal conditions while impatient people must accept whatever conditions exist when their urgency demands action. This control over timing becomes control over outcomes, since timing often determines success or failure more than effort or capability. Having time as your ally means that every delay potentially improves your position while worsening your opponent's position. While they exhaust themselves fighting circumstances they cannot change, you conserve your energy for circumstances you can influence. While they grow weaker from struggling against time, you grow stronger from working with time. The treaty reminds me that time is the ultimate strategic resource because it cannot be manufactured, purchased, or stolen. It can only be used wisely or foolishly. Those who make time their enemy will always feel rushed, pressured, and behind schedule. Those who make time their ally will find that deadlines become opportunities and delays become advantages. Remember that the alliance of time requires patience, not just as a tactic, but as a fundamental philosophy about how progress occurs. When you trust that natural timing will eventually create optimal conditions, you can maintain strategic patience even when immediate action seems more attractive or socially acceptable. The master's playbook that contained my most sophisticated strategies was written during the final years of my military career, when experience had taught me how to orchestrate multiple timing cycles simultaneously and navigate the complex patience requirements of competing objectives. These advanced techniques separate strategic patience masters from those who understand only basic waiting principles. Multi-layered patience strategies became necessary when I faced situations requiring different timing for different aspects of the same campaign. Political alliances needed immediate attention to prevent deterioration, while military positioning required extended patience to achieve optimal advantage. Resource accumulation followed seasonal cycles that could not be accelerated, while intelligence gathering required rapid response to fleeting opportunities. The challenge was maintaining strategic patience for long-term objectives while taking incremental action on medium-term requirements without compromising either timeline. This demanded developing what I called compartmentalized patience, the ability to be patient with some aspects of your situation while being active with others, without allowing the different timelines to interfere with each other. I learned to balance multiple timing cycles by creating separate strategic tracks that operated according to their own optimal rhythms. The political track moved quickly to maintain relationships and prevent opposition from organizing. The military track moved slowly to accumulate overwhelming tactical advantages. The resource track followed natural cycles of availability and scarcity that could not be influenced but could be anticipated. The sophistication lay in coordinating these different tracks so they would converge at the moment when action became appropriate. This required calculating backwards from optimal timing to determine when each track needed to begin, what pace it needed to maintain, and how delays in one track would affect the others. Advanced market timing became crucial when operating in complex environments where multiple forces influenced the conditions for success. I had to read not just immediate tactical conditions, but economic cycles, political trends, social movements, and natural patterns that created layered timing requirements. The most complex patience challenge involved situations where optimal timing for your primary objective conflicted with necessary timing for supporting objectives. Sometimes the perfect moment for your main goal required sacrificing advantages in secondary areas, while sometimes protecting secondary advantages forced you to accept suboptimal timing for your primary purpose. These decisions required developing strategic patience at the philosophical level, patience not just with specific timelines, but with the inherent complexity and imperfection of real-world implementation. The master's playbook taught me that advanced patience strategies often involve accepting good timing rather than insisting on perfect timing. I also developed techniques for maintaining patience while taking incremental action that appeared unrelated to your ultimate objectives. This approach allowed me to make progress without alerting opponents to my true intentions or timeline. The incremental actions served multiple purposes. They maintained momentum, provided learning opportunities, and created positioning advantages, while preserving the strategic patience required for optimal major moves. The most sophisticated strategy involved using apparent patience as active deception. By appearing to wait passively while actually implementing complex positioning strategies, I could lull opponents into believing they understood my timeline and capabilities. Their miscalculation of my readiness became the foundation for devastating surprise when I transitioned from apparent patience to decisive action. Remember that advanced patience strategies require developing comfort with complexity and ambiguity that basic patience approaches cannot handle. You must be able to maintain different levels of patience simultaneously, coordinate multiple timing cycles, and execute sophisticated deception while never losing sight of your ultimate strategic objectives. This level of strategic patience becomes an art form that few master completely. The daily practice scroll that guided my personal development contained the specific disciplines and mental exercises that transformed strategic patience from an intellectual concept into an instinctive capability. Building this practice requires systematic development of patience capacity through progressive training, just as physical strength develops through consistent exercise over time. My morning routine began with what I called patience meditation, spending time in deliberate stillness while maintaining complete mental alertness. This was not passive relaxation, but active practice of maintaining strategic awareness without the compulsion to act. I would sit quietly while analyzing complex scenarios in my mind, developing comfort with uncertainty and building tolerance for unresolved situations. The mental exercises I developed focused on strengthening specific patience capabilities that strategic thinking requires. I practiced extending my analytical timeline, forcing myself to consider implications that would unfold over months and years rather than days and weeks. I exercised my ability to hold multiple possibilities simultaneously without prematurely choosing between them. One crucial exercise involved deliberately delaying decisions that could be made immediately, using the extra time to gather additional information and consider alternative approaches. This trained my mind to resist the psychological pressure for quick resolution while developing sensitivity to the quality improvements that patience provides. I also practiced maintaining strategic thinking under artificial pressure by creating scenarios where immediate action seemed necessary but patience would yield better results. These exercises built mental resilience against the emotional urgency that destroys strategic patience in real situations. Building systems that support patient decision-making became essential as my responsibilities increased. I established protocols that prevented impulsive choices by requiring multiple reviews separated by specific time intervals. Important decisions had to pass through stages of initial analysis, verification, consultation, and final confirmation before implementation became possible. The system included specific triggers that would pause any decision-making process when emotional intensity exceeded optimal levels. I learned that strategic patience becomes impossible when fear, anger, or excitement overwhelm analytical capability. So I built mechanisms to recognize and counter these emotional states before they could compromise judgment, creating an environment that rewards strategic patience rather than impulsive action required reshaping both physical and social surroundings. I surrounded myself with advisors who valued thorough analysis over quick responses and established communication patterns that encouraged deliberation rather than immediate reaction. The practice also involved developing what I called patience, endurance, the ability to maintain strategic thinking for extended periods without fatigue or frustration. Like physical endurance, this capacity could be built through progressive training that gradually extended the duration and complexity of patient analysis. I tracked my patience practice through detailed records that measured both the quality of my strategic thinking and the outcomes achieved through patient approaches. This documentation revealed patterns about when my patience was most effective and what factors tended to undermine my strategic discipline. The scroll reminded me that strategic patience must be practiced during low-stakes situations to be available. During high-stakes situations, you cannot expect to maintain patient analysis under extreme pressure if you have not developed that capability through consistent practice during normal circumstances. Daily practice transforms strategic patience from a conscious effort into an automatic response. When patient analysis becomes your default approach to challenges, you no longer have to fight against impulsive tendencies. You naturally seek optimal timing and thorough preparation before committing to action. Remember that building strategic patience practice requires the same commitment you would give to developing any master-level skill. Consistency matters more than intensity, and small daily improvements compound into extraordinary capability over time. The eternal victory monument that stands in my memory honors not the battles I won through strategic patience, but the lasting transformations that patient victories create versus the temporary gains that impatient victories provide. This monument represents my final understanding that true success endures across generations, while rushed success fades with the circumstances that created it. Throughout my career, I observed two distinct types of victory with fundamentally different characteristics. Quick victories achieved through bold action and superior tactics provided immediate satisfaction and dramatic stories, but they rarely created conditions for sustained advantage. The generals who specialized in rapid conquest found themselves fighting the same battles repeatedly because their victories did not establish lasting stability. My patient victories worked differently. They took longer to achieve and appeared less dramatic in the moment, but they created conditions that prevented the same problems from recurring. By waiting for optimal timing and positioning, I could achieve results that transformed the strategic landscape permanently rather than temporarily. The difference lay in the foundation that strategic patience creates beneath visible success. Impatient victories rely on overcoming current obstacles through superior effort or tactics, but they do not address the underlying conditions that created those obstacles. Patient victories change the underlying conditions themselves, making future obstacles less likely to appear and easier to handle when they do appear. This principle extends beyond military campaigns to every area of human achievement. The professional who builds career success through strategic patience creates reputation, relationships, and capabilities that continue generating opportunities long after the initial effort has ended. The entrepreneur who builds business success through patient positioning creates systems and market position that provide lasting competitive advantage. Strategic patience also creates what I call generational leverage benefits that extend beyond your own lifetime to influence future generations. The principles you establish through patient effort become foundations that others can build upon, multiplying the impact of your original investment across time. My own writings have endured for over 2 millennia, not because they described clever tactics for immediate situations, but because they captured timeless principles that apply across all competitive environments. The strategic patience that guided their creation also ensured their lasting relevance. The monument reminds me that patient people leave different legacies than impatient people. Those who rush toward immediate achievement create impressive short-term results that are remembered briefly. Those who build through strategic patience create lasting contributions that influence countless future decisions and outcomes. As I prepare to leave this wisdom with you, I want you to understand that mastering strategic patience will transform not just your immediate circumstances, but the entire trajectory of your life. The decisions you make with patient consideration today will create advantages that compound for decades. The timing you choose through strategic analysis will position you for opportunities that hasty action would prevent you from recognizing. The patient path requires more courage than the impatient path because it demands faith in principles rather than comfort in immediate results. But this courage is rewarded with achievements that endure, influence that multiplies, and satisfaction that deepens rather than fades with time. May your patience be strategic, your timing be optimal, and your victories be eternal. The legacy of strategic patience now passes to you.